Gunfire in Washington disrupted the calculated silence of the diplomatic corridor. On a Saturday evening, a security breach at the White House Correspondents' Dinner challenged the very architecture of the state visit. In the theater of global power, such a rupture is never merely local. It is a test of structural resilience. While the American political landscape shifted, the British monarchy remained anchored by a millennium of precedent. The sovereign does not retreat in the face of volatility. To cancel is to validate chaos. To proceed is to affirm the permanence of the Western alliance. This itinerary serves as a veil for profound strategic frictions. Beneath the choreographed warmth of the 250th anniversary celebrations lie the shadows of the Iranian nuclear program and the fractured integrity of NATO. The king arrives as the living embodiment of a state seeking to bridge a widening transatlantic rift. Buckingham Palace maintained its characteristic clinical detachment. The official confirmation of the visit was a masterpiece of restraint, absorbing risk into the routine of duty. The institution views security not as a variable, but as a silent prerequisite for the exercise of soft power. When the royal aircraft descended on Monday, the gesture resonated beyond the immediate news cycle. The monarchy operates on a timeline of centuries, rendering the current crisis a mere footnote. The crown remains unmoved by the gravity of the present moment. That is its primary function. April 27th, 2026. This date terminates a 19-year hiatus of the British sovereign from American soil. Nearly 2 decades have passed since the crown last navigated these corridors. In that interval, the very architecture of the Western Alliance has weathered profound structural fatigue. The 250th anniversary of American independence provides the stage, yet the backdrop is stained by the kinetic disruption of the present. The discharge of a weapon at the Washington Hilton targeting the former president was not merely an act of violence. It was a direct assault on the predictability that the monarchy exists to safeguard. Behind the closed doors of the Foreign Office and the palace, the calculus remained unwavering. While the name Cole Thomas Allen dominates the immediate media cycle, the institution views such figures as ephemeral variables. To allow a single individual to derail a state visit would be a confession of systemic weakness. The British state does not trade in such concessions. The king's arrival proceeded on the formal advice of the government. It was a clinical decision, stripped of emotion. The sovereign acts not on impulse, but on a mandate of continuity. Security protocols were recalibrated with surgical precision, yet the public narrative remained undisturbed. The message transmitted to the world was one of cold, calculated resilience. The crown does not flinch, it simply moves forward, absorbing the shocks of the present into the vast silence of its history. Behind the gilded veneer of state banquets and choreographed handshakes, the structural integrity of the Anglo-American relationship is undergoing a profound erosion. The diplomatic theater serves as a necessary mask for a deepening ideological rift between Downing Street and the American executive branch. While the British cabinet navigates a landscape defined by institutional caution, the strategic divergence over military operations in Iran, and the precarious future of NATO has created a palpable atmospheric chill. This is the crucible where the crown occupies its most demanding modern niche. King Charles finds himself suspended in the delicate tension between constitutional neutrality and geopolitical necessity. He is the silent conduit in a chamber filled with the clamor of partisan friction. As the sovereign, he must embody the interests of the government of the day. Yet, as a global statesman, he must bridge the chasm with an administration that may view that very government with open skepticism. This is the sophisticated anatomy of the mediator. The king's influence does not stem from a legislative mandate, but from the cumulative weight of a millennium. Where politicians trade in the ephemeral currency of the next election, the sovereign operates within the permanence of the state. His presence provides a stabilizing architecture that individual administrations, however powerful, cannot replicate. In the intervals between political shouting, the monarchy performs its ancient, essential function, safeguarding the continuity of the alliance when the architects of policy are no longer on speaking terms. History functions as a cycle of rhythmic echoes. To calibrate the strategic weight of the king's presence, one must revisit June 1939. Britain then stood on the precipice of global conflagration, facing a threat that sought to dismantle the established order. George VI arrived in Washington amidst a climate of profound American withdrawal. The hot dog summit at Hyde Park was a calculated dismantling of formality. While the United States sought shelter in isolationism, the king used the subtle architecture of social grace to erode the walls of congressional skepticism. This was the deployment of soft power in its most concentrated form. The objective was not a signed treaty, but the humanization of a tactically fractured partnership. It was a victory of atmosphere over evidence. Charles III now navigates a landscape of hauntingly similar proportions. As the shadows of Middle Eastern conflict lengthen and the structural integrity of NATO is tested, the sovereign serves as the living memory of the 1939 success. He remains the state's ultimate instrument when the tools of conventional diplomacy are exhausted. In the deliberate silence of a state banquet, the crown achieves what the friction of partisan debate cannot. The diplomacy of porcelain often proves more resilient than armor. History is not merely a record, it is the blueprint for survival. The king's arrival in 2026 coincides with the sesquicentennial of the American Republic. There is a calculated, almost surgical irony in this alignment. The direct heir of George III now stands as the invited witness to the anniversary of the very revolution that severed the transatlantic bond. History recalls a similar convergence in 1976. Elizabeth II arrived during the bicentennial, finding an American psyche fractured by the collapse of institutional trust following Vietnam and Watergate. Where the Republic felt its foundations tremble, monarchy offered the steadying hand of millennium-old continuity. The sovereign acts as a mirror of duration, reflecting a timeline that renders the immediate political crisis insignificant. In the vacuum of contemporary authority, the king provides the architecture of permanence. The visit is not merely a commemoration. It is a ritual of stabilization. The crown transcends the ephemeral grievances of the current election cycle. It serves as a silent bridge over the abyss of historical amnesia. By honoring the birth of the Republic, the monarchy reaffirms the shared strategic foundation that remains long after the shouting of partisan actors fades. Past grievances are not merely corrected. They are outgrown through the relentless application of duty. The British monarchy functions as the state's ultimate diplomatic insurance policy. Success in this mission provides empirical proof that the quiet application of soft power outlasts the volatile shifts of ideological doctrine. We are observing a profound stress test of the transatlantic architecture. Failure of this magnitude would signal more than a strained alliance. It would foreshadow the final erosion of the strategic framework that has defined the West for nearly a century. The inability to bridge this divide leaves the Western Bloc vulnerable to an unprecedented existential threat. This visit has moved beyond the artifice of celebration. It is now a cold examination of the crown's utility as the silent axis of global governance. The objective is not a public relations triumph, but the quiet restoration of equilibrium. In the final accounting, reconciliation is far more vital than the optics of victory. History will discard the momentary violence in Washington. It will record only whether the institution possessed the gravity to stabilize a world in flux. The monarchy survives because it remains a constant in an era of variables. It is the architecture that remains when the architects have failed. To track the evolution of this ancient institution, join our community of observers. We invite your analysis of the Crown's strategic future in the comments below.